Continuing with the advanced options, we have option settings for cut, copy, paste, which involve in some cases objects. We have image size and quality options, which has to do with editing and compressing your images. We have an option to print in high quality for graphics. And there's a couple of chart options that include showing the element names and the point values on hover. So we're back in Excel, and we are going to go to the advanced option settings, which by now you know is Alt-F-T. Left click Advanced, and we're going to scroll down a little bit to the cut, copy, and paste options. The first one, which is selected by default, Show Paste Options button when content is pasted. I'm going to close that. Select a range. Left click another cell, right click, left click Paste. And that button right there, all the special paste options that we have access to, is the button that we can turn off in the advanced options settings. So scrolling down again, when I turn that off and I do the same thing, Control C, right click, paste, I no longer get that button. The next option, which is on by default, Show Insert Options buttons, has to do with inserting columns and rows. I'm going to insert a couple of rows into this workbook. Insert. And I get this little tag that allows me to keep the formatting that existed above or below the inserted cells, or I can clear the formatting and set it to the default. The same thing happens when I insert a column, and I get this little tag. With this option deselected, you won't have that tag to set the formatting for the inserted cells or columns. It'll pick up the formatting from the cells around the inserted columns and rows. The next option, Cut, Copy, and Sort Inserted Objects with their parent cells, has to do with objects, including forms controls. The default is to have this checkbox checked. So I'm going to show you what that does. I'm going to customize the ribbon a bit by adding the Developer tab, because the Developer tab in the Controls group, the Insert command will enable me to insert a control. And with that option selected, if I'm going to copy and paste the cells that include that control, Control V, I'll copy and paste a control. Going back to the advanced options, if I deselect that and I go to copy the cells, Control V, the control isn't copied with the cells. So if you work with some objects in your worksheet, fairly often including forms controls, you may find this useful. The next option, or several options, have to do with images. First, you can select the workbook that you want to manage the images in. The default is the workbook that we're in, which is Book 1. Neither one of these are selected by default. So the first one, Discard Editing Data, deletes all of that data that's been accumulated when you edit some images, so that when you open the workbook back up, you can't revert back or reset the image back to its original state. The second one, Do Not Compress Images in File, the default is to automatically compress the images, which actually saves storage space. It'll make the image smaller than it otherwise would be. If you do select this, Do Not Compress Images, you can then establish the size that you want to save the images in. There's some information that will be displayed in a screen tip when you hover over these icons. For discard editing, it describes what I just explained, and same thing for Do Not Compress Images in File. Next is the ability to change to high quality mode when you're printing graphics. So for graphics like images and charts, you may want to improve the visual quality of the printed output, and you can do that by left-clicking this option, High Quality Mode for Graphics. The last item we're going to cover, and both of these are selected by default, is to show chart elements names on hover and to show data point values on hover. I've got a chart I quickly set up just to show you that when you hover over the elements in the chart, you get a screen tip that shows you what that element is called. That's the plot area, that's a series, That's the horizontal category and so on. So I get those screen tips when I hover over the elements of the chart. And I also get a screen tip that shows me the value of the points that are plotted on the chart. With these options deselected or unchecked, that no longer happens. And hover over any one of these data points or the chart elements, I don't have the screen tip display either the chart element or the data point value. So that was miscellaneous advanced options. We had some cut, copy, and paste options where we had the ability to show a smart tag when we're copying and pasting that gives us access to the paste special options. We can turn that off. When we're inserting columns and rows, we can have Excel display a smart tag that allows us to pick up the formatting around the inserted columns and rows, or we can have the default formatting applied to the inserted columns and rows. When we're dealing with objects and we're copying and pasting cells that contain those objects, we can have those objects pasted with the parent cells, or we can leave the objects behind and just paste the parent cells in the new location. We have some image options, which we can first select the workbook that we want to apply these options to. We can, one, discard the editing so that when we close the workbook and open it back up, we won't be able to reset the image back to its original state. That option is not selected by default. The images are automatically compressed by default, but we can turn that off and have Excel not compress the images in the file. When we have images and graphics that we want to print out, we might want to choose to print them in a high quality mode. And for charts, when we hover over the chart, we'll either get the element name or the data point value by default, but we can turn either one of those option settings off.